The rise of Uber left Doug Shifter financially ruined. He wrote on Facebook, "When the taxi industry started, I averaged 40 to 50 hours a week. But I cannot survive any longer, working 120 hours. I am not a slave and I refuse to be one." Shortly afterwards, Doug drove to City Hall, put a gun to his head, and pulled the trigger. Doug is certainly not the only driver who has taken their own life and cited Uber as the reason. In India, one driver who couldn't make his car loan payments on time committed suicide, which led to an angry mob of drivers showing up at Uber's offices, carrying his dead body, shouting that if Uber's wages weren't so low, that driver would still be alive today. Now, Travis's view on Uber was simple.
We're making drivers' lives a hell of a lot better. They're making a lot more money. They're making ends meet. They're living their American dream, and Uber's helping them do that. Riders are getting around town much more efficiently. I'm not sure who hurts from this.
And some people would agree with Travis that Uber was simply a more innovative and efficient system that gives drivers a way to earn extra money and passengers cheaper and easier rides. Win-win, right? Well, not necessarily. Many others have pointed out that whilst drivers may earn more at first glance, that money is then eaten up by fuel, taxes, and car maintenance, often leaving them with less than minimum wage. Plus, Uber drivers don't have secure employment or many of the benefits they would normally get with a taxi company. Not to mention the fact that letting almost anyone be a driver opens up all kinds of safety risks to the public. Needless to say, neither taxi drivers nor taxi operators were going to let Uber win without a fight. Literally. Countless anti-Uber movements have been staged by taxi operators and drivers, such as causing a gridlock on the road in protest of Uber. It's also reported that in some countries, there are taxi cartels, which had ties to organized crime, who would assault Uber drivers, steal their cars, or even light them on fire. In some places, such as Mexico, there are reports of Uber drivers literally being killed, with many people suspecting local taxi operators. This was an all-out war between Uber and traditional transportation. The truth is, everyone has their own opinion on whether Uber are the good guys or the bad guys in this story. But what's undeniable is that wherever Uber went, they were constantly surrounded by controversy. In 2014, a 26-year-old ordered an Uber to take her home after a late night at the office. It was a long trip and she dozed off in the back of the car. When her driver noticed, he changed route and switched off his phone, making him untraceable to Uber and the police. He found a secluded area to park and climbed into the back of the car and raped her. He then threatened to kill her if she told the police. As he drove off, she managed to snap a photo of his number plates, and thankfully, the police were able to catch him. But the story went viral, and many people blamed Uber's lax security. This simply reinforced beliefs that Uber wasn't safe. Some countries even temporarily banned ride-hailing services like Uber completely. Now, of course, given the huge number of rides taken with Uber, incidents like this always seem like a possibility. And of course, traditional taxi companies have had horror stories like this too. But many people felt Uber had lowered the bar so much to become a driver, which had added a higher risk. And despite many more horrific incidents like this over the years, Uber refused to raise the entry requirements to become a driver. There are even reports that at Uber HQ, whenever a sexual assault victim decided not to pursue litigation or police evidence wasn't conclusive enough, the Uber team would cheer. It also emerged that credit card thieves had been using Uber for both drug trafficking and sex trafficking. And because of all the free cash bonuses Uber gave away to new drivers, Uber had been inadvertently funding all kinds of criminal activity. Now, I would argue that when Uber first began, public sentiment towards the company was very positive. Uber was cheaper, innovative, and it was the underdog going against traditional transportation. But as the years went by, public sentiment began to shift. News articles broke about how Uber had used Greyball to deceive cities, and how they'd used black hat tactics to try and crush Lyft and other competitors. And the bad press just kept coming. For example, it was found that in Indonesia, Uber had been bribing police officers, and they'd then been forging receipts for those illegal bribes, so they could count them as business expenses. Uber also faced serious data and privacy issues. At one point, Travis changed Uber's settings so the app could track people even after they'd ended their ride, because he wanted to see where people went after being dropped off by their Uber. It's also reported Uber looked at the data of individual users, such as celebrities, to see where they were traveling and when. In later years, Uber paid hackers $100,000 to cover up a massive data breach that exposed the personal data of 57 million Uber customers. Uber would also have to pay $28.5 million to settle a lawsuit, because Uber had falsely advertised that it had industry-leading background checks, which it evidently didn't. But one of the biggest PR disasters of all for Uber came in 2017, when taxi drivers were striking to protest Trump's ban on Muslim countries. Uber ignored the strike, which meant they rendered the strike ineffective, and they profited from the fact that taxi drivers weren't driving. Many people were outraged, and Delete Uber began trending on Twitter. Over 500,000 people deleted their accounts, and likely many more millions deleted the app from their phone. Lyft, who had almost been crushed by Uber, suddenly had a resurgence as people switched to using them instead. This incident, combined with everything else, meant Uber's public reputation was reaching a new all-time low. Uber had still been growing and expanding, but public sentiment towards them had been worsening day by day. And I'd love to tell you that this is the part of the story where Uber turn it all around, where they win back public trust and solve all their issues. But I can't tell you that, because things are about to get even worse.